What's up, guys? Gonna do a quick update video here, as since the last video I did, quite a bit has happened, and I figured I would go ahead and get on this now so I could go over some things. So since the last time I did a video, I was talking about needing a brace for my upper shock towers, basically from this one to this one. And I had taped off with masking tape. I originally was going to go from here to here, which is the front upper engine mount, to there, and then basically around the back. It's kind of like a big diamond shape. And I didn't really like that design, simply for the fact of this line that would have came all the way forward to there. It just didn't sit right with me. So I came up with this instead. And this is basically a dual tube design. 3/8 bolts on each side. It's got a gusset right there in the center. And then I made this 1/4-inch plate. This is all 1/4-inch. These here, and then there's actually 2 tabs right there, one for each cylinder. And it worked out really good because both of these shock towers, that tube right there, they're about 4 degrees tipped out. So whenever you're really thinking about energy and motion, when the suspension comes up, the pressure from those shocks would want to move those in this way. So you've got it braced this way, and that brace would want to flex up, which now it's anchored to the top of the engine. And that bracket also is for vibration and support of the engine wanting to vibrate this way. So it worked out good without adding a lot of weight. I think it looks factory, like a factory design, and it flowed really well with the exhaust. And the exhaust I also just wrapped up the other day, which was one of the reasons I wanted to make this video, because there's a lot going on with that it's just easier for me to address it now than if I do an update video later when so much more has happened. So these are both, they're standard 1 3/4-inch drags. I got a builder kit, so I was able to fab it up and get all the angles exactly how I wanted it. So the thing of it is with this exhaust is there's some things you should know, and some of them have to do with stuff that's coming later for why it's like this. First of all, I know straight open drags hurt low and mid-range torque, especially on a closer to stock engine, but sheer horsepower and speed was never really what this was about in the first place. If I really wanted to go that route with this project, I never would have put or chose this engine in here. I could have put a Hayabusa in here. I could have put any inline 4 sport bike engine in here. We could get as crazy as put a 5.3 LS in here. And you know what? Somebody probably would have said, oh, well, you should have put a 6.0 LS. And it's never enough. It's never enough. But the point of this whole thing was to combine a hot rod with a Harley V twin. A Model A and a Harley they're two of the most iconic American things in our history. So that's why it is what it is. I really don't think a Model A with the Japanese inline 4 is the same. I mean, I'm sure somebody out there is going to disagree, but this is what it is for me. So that being said, I know with these drags that you lose back pressure. And I also know that that front pipe is a little bit longer than this rear, but I had started thinking about it, and really for being a wide open pipe, to add a few more inches to this to equal the same as that, I don't really think it's going to make a whole lot of a bit of a difference on pipes this short. And the second thing is I'm going to be tuning these with lollipops. I'm sure there's some of you out there that know what that is, but for those of you that don't, what a lollipop is basically you take a washer like this, not this big in this case, but basically you take a washer like this and you can weld a stud or a bolt to here. And then you're gonna drill a hole on the back side of the pipe for that stud or bolt to pass through. And basically you're gonna have to fish this up in here, and that bolt or stud will pop out the back side. And basically in the tube you can turn this washer, you know, anywhere from totally sideways to a little bit open or all the way open. And obviously, you know, the more open it is, the less restriction there is. So since this tube is shorter, if you had this one, say, slightly cocked like this, and on this tube it was closer to wide open, you would increase the pressure in this tube, which is shorter, to match the pressure in this longer tube. And they have been shown to actually increase horsepower and torque on the dyno, so it's not really some rigged up myth. So that's what the tuning on those. The other thing with these pipes that nobody knows yet is I'm planning to later install a flamethrower kit on this. And with a flamethrower kit, the main thing is they don't work too well with a baffled exhaust. But basically a flamethrower works by drilling and tapping a bung in the pipe for a spark plug that's hooked to a separate coil. And there's two ways you can do it. One way is it cuts down your ignition, so it drops the firing on the cylinder so that you have more unburnt fuel come through, and then the spark plug ignites it and therefore shooting the flames out. The second, more radical way is from the backside again of the pipe, you would plumb in a nitrous oxide system's fuel, solenoid, and line. And yes, nitrous oxide systems, not NOS. I can't stand people who still call it NOS. It's an abbreviation. So that aside, they don't work well with a baffled exhaust. So that was the other reason for running open pipes, was the flamethrower kit that I want to install that's much, much later. So that's what's going on with the exhaust. I'm also not sure if I'm going to wrap it yet. And I had just got this chrome bracket on here, which was to solve another issue I've been having. So I had got this air cleaner for it. And whenever I ordered it, I was under the impression that with the supplied bracket, you could rotate this, 360 degrees, any which way you wanted it on there. But that was not the case. It's got these 3 holes on this flange. And those 3 holes will only allow it to mount like this, like it would be on a bike. And the closest to up that it would mount was too far back where it would actually be running into this tube. So this is the bracket right here, and you can see what I'm talking about. These recessed holes are for the carburetor, and these 3 on the far outside are for these 3. So there's only, so many positions that you can clock this in, and straight up was not one of them. So I got this bracket, which is a chrome steel one. It's either custom chrome or drag specialties. They're pretty much all the same. And I'm basically gonna make an adapter flange, maybe like 1 inch, and it'll have a flange on this side that matches the carburetor, and then a separate flange on this side that will match that air cleaner, but in the 12 o'clock position that I want it in. So that's what's going on with that. I also still have to get a crankcase breather / vent kit for this. I almost forgot that this crankcase needs to breathe through this bolt and that bolt, not these. That's just something that's just temporarily stuck in there. But the factory ones, it's like a hollowed out bolt, and the crankcase actually vents through there. And on the factory bike, it would vent to a line in the breather. So basically the engine sucks that in and burns it, which I don't want to do for a number of reasons. So I'm going to get a kit that basically has a tube that goes over like this. It's a hollow tube. And then it's got an outlet on it, and a rubber hose will hook to that, and it basically vents out under the car into the atmosphere. So I've got to get that taken care of. And I've still got this rectifier / regulator that I got to get hooked up and mounted. I do know that this double pin is in from the stator, which that wire is on the engine right now. But I have to make a pin connector for this, which would be the out regulated current or voltage to the starter and battery. Somebody had let me know that basically the body of this itself is the ground. So when you bolt it to the frame, it basically grounds itself. That's my understanding as of right now. So I've got to get that taken care of. I still got this oil tank that I got to get mounted, which for that, I had gone over in another video that I'm going to mount it right here. And I got this really cool cap. I didn't even know they made this. But it's basically an original Moon Eyes spinner cap, knockoff cap. And it fits that filler neck. Fortunately, it was the last one they had in stock. But the oil tank's going to get mounted right there, like I had mentioned in the last video. So it replicates one of the old nitro tanks on a vintage gasser. So I got to get that mounted, which I'm probably going to run hard line for on the oil lines to come back around to the bottom of the oil pump. I think for this situation and where it's got a route and the heat of the engine and everything else, I'm going to go ahead and do the hard lines instead of like a rubber or braided line. So I got to get that taken care of. And then I still, before I try to start this up, I got this Ultima single fire ignition that's basically a standalone ignition. And I'm going to make a mount right here for the coil, which is where it would typically be on the bike as well. And I need to get a push starting button for the starter relay. I have a factory key ignition on the way here right now. I hope the wires are long enough that I can run that inside, because I am planning on putting a dash in there and everything just like a real car. So I want my ignition, keyed ignition in there, the starter button, all that stuff. So basically you could handle all of that sitting inside. I don't really want to have a deal where that having to start stuff out here and then get in the car and all that stuff. So I'm going to try to mount all of that inside. And to address the fuel thing from the other video too, with a small fuel tank that I was planning on putting here, that gets filled off of the larger fuel cell in the back. Two things. One is, I get this box. It was only going to be about the size of this box. Very, very small. In fact, probably not even this big. And have an inlet and an outlet to the rear fuel cell with an electric fuel pump that would pump the fuel in. It would kind of float around in here, and whatever excess would just go out the return. And then there would be a small bung on the bottom with a small piece of hose that would basically gravity feed this CV carburetor, because they require very low amounts of pressure. But I actually had, what's his name here? Matthew Charrington on my YouTube. He had suggested a Mr. Gasket 42S electric fuel pump for this carburetor that would work. I looked it up and it puts out like only 2 to 3 psi. And then somebody else on one of my Facebook groups, they have a setup where they're running 2 CV40 carburetors, and he had told me, I think it's called a Spruce Arrow or something like that, electric fuel pump that's basically the same thing. It only puts out like 2 to 3 psi, and he says he has no problems with his. Because I'm concerned about overpowering the needle in this and basically flooding the float bowl with too much pressure. But everyone seems to say that those really low pressure pumps will work on one of these CV40 carburetors without flooding it. So for now, I'm gonna not do this tank idea. I mean, it'll actually save me work and it'll keep the top of the engine clean. And I'm going to try the low pressure electric. So that's what's going on with that. And I think that about covers it. There's other things I could work on this. There's plenty of stuff. But my main thing right now that this front suspension is tied up and that brace is done is I want to work on the things necessary to get this fired up. Whether it's the oiling, fuel system, ignition, really the fuel system, I could just rig a temporary tank or bottle up here to start the engine, obviously not to drive it like that, but I could rig up the fuel to get it started. But I do want to get it running. And this is my first Harley engine ever. So thanks for, everybody out there that's caught things that I didn't catch. I have years and years of experience with all kinds of engines and building stuff like this, whether it's cars, motorcycles, snowmobiles, dirt bikes, all that stuff. But this is my first Harley anything. So I got this engine on Craigslist and it had nothing. It was basically just the engine. It had no ignition, no carburetor, no pipes, no oil tank. It was just an engine, and it came out of a Sportster chopper. So all this stuff I've had to figure out. So some guys are like, well, why didn't you do this or this, that, and the other? I'm like, slow down, bro. Like I'm having to figure all of this out. They're not that complicated. I actually think they're pretty cool little engines. There's something about these V-twins that I think it reminds me kind of like a radial engine in an aircraft, but with only 2 cylinders. So I think it's just a cool engine. But anyhow, that's where I'm at right now. And stay tuned. We'll see what happens next.